Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at how to implement authentication on your ChatGPT app. In the last video, we talked about how to manage states and how to identify a person using some of the identifiers that ChatGPT sends you. But authentication is still very important, especially if you have to understand who this user is, how to protect sensitive data, restrict access to certain users. You might have roles and policies that you set around how people can interact with your app. And these are all the things that authentication is going to help you with. Now, the easiest way to do this is using an existing authentication provider. I'm going to be showing you exactly how I do this. For me, I'm going to be using Auth0, but I'm going to show you exactly how this works. Now, first and foremost, you can see I have my ChatGPT app. Now, I'm going to drop a link in the description as to how I built this application. We talked about it while we're talking about state. All the code and the repo can be found also in the description as well. So you can clone this and have this set up on your end as well. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to this particular application. You will see that authorization here is set to OAuth, and you can see like some of the pieces are going to be now protected. So what you see here is that when I initiate this, instead of just installing the app as we've been doing previously, it's now kind of giving me this sort of OAuth flow. And in this OAuth flow, what you're going to see is that it has redirected me to an Auth0 screen for logging in, right? So this is my Auth0 application, which is protected, that I have to log in to get access to first. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. I'm going to use Google to sign in here. I'm going to go ahead and do this. All right, so now my application is now authenticated. So this means that every conversation moving forward is going to be based on that authentication. So now I can go ahead and add this particular application, my task manager app, and I can say something like, show me my task board. And this is going to be able to interact with the OAuth. So here, showing me my task board, and it's going to go ahead and provide me with access to my information. So this is stored information that I have in my task list, which is why it's showing me all of that. So this is how you protect your ChatGPT applications. Now you might be building for just general use and maybe it's not necessary for you, or you might be building for your team, or you might be building an application that requires people to go sign into your application. You absolutely need to implement OAuth for this to happen. So first things first, we're going to talk about exactly how OAuth works. Once we're done with that, I'm going to show you how it's implemented here as well. All right. So let's get started. To learn everything you need to know about the authentication specifications for ChatGPT app, you could go to their documentation page under Authenticate Users. It talks and goes into extensive details about how to set this up. But before we kind of go into the specific implementation for ChatGPT apps, let's talk about how authorization flows work with MCP servers, generally speaking. There are three pillars to keep in mind. There's a client pillar, which is basically originating the request. In this case, our ChatGPT app. There's the MCP server itself, and there's also an authorization server. So ChatGPT, the client, initially sends an MCP request to your server, typically without a token. Your MCP server is going to respond with the HTTP 401 unauthorized, and it includes a www authenticate header, which is pointing to where your OAuth metadata is. This is really where the discovery starts. So your client, in this case ChatGPT, will hit those endpoints. First, it's going to hit the OAuth protected resource to find the authorization server. Then it's going to fetch the OAuth authorization server to get the OAuth endpoints. Now, once ChatGPT has dynamically registered itself as a client, the user is going to be redirected to an authorization server. So this authorization server is basically what's going to handle the rest of the authentication. The user gets to log in. Now they could use, a simple username and password login, or it could be a social login, like logging in with Google, like we did in our case, or logging in with GitHub or any other social provider. Within this particular process, authorization codes get exchanged for tokens, And those tokens become what's being used to get the access token, which is now required or used for every single request that is made to MCP server. And that is how MCP server is now going to be able to go return the correct responses back to the client and give them the access based on whatever scope is allowed for the logged in client. So, in a nutshell, that's essentially how MCP server's authorization works. All right, so now we understand our MCP server flow for authentication. Let's go ahead and set things up. Now, keep in mind, one of the key things we need here is an authorization server. Now, you can build this from scratch, but it's really difficult to build out because you have to think about so many different things. You have to think about dynamic client registration, you think about how to mint and verify tokens, you think about your refresh token rotation. There's so much stuff that you can think about. The UI for logging in and all these types of things. For me, I use Auth0 because they abstract all the heavy lifting. Auth0 handles the user login, social logins, like if I'm using Google or GitHub, or even a simple username and password. They handle password management. They handle all the really hard stuff when it comes to authentication. And our MCP server just needs to simply redirect to Auth0 for login, verify the ID token that Auth0 returns, and then mint our own access tokens for the MCP client. It really simplifies the way you build authentication using a tool like Auth0. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about how to set this up. All right, so to get started, head to auth0.com and create a free account. I already have an account created, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. Next up, go to applications and create a new application. I already have an application created, but to create a new application, simply hit the create application button and choose a regular web application. Don't forget to enter a name as well. Now I'm going to show you my application that I've already created just to show you the key things that you should look out for. When you create an application, you're going to be given a domain, a client ID, and a client secret. You're also going to populate, if you want, an application logo for branding, as well as your callback URLs. Now, we need to create these callback routes on our MCP server first, and then make them available here. We want people to be able to log in with, through social login. You could also go into authentication and add new social logins, right? So currently I have my Google login as the login I'm using right now, but you can also use other logins. So once we have all of this set up, we can grab all our IDs and keys. And what we want to do is to go into our project. So in our project, I've added a .env.example file, which contains all the environment variables that you're going to be needing. And here you can see some of the key things that we need. We need our Auth0 domain, our client ID, our client secret, and then we also need our task manager public URL as well. So you're going to get access to this. So all you need to do is just fill in your own keys in here to use this application. All right, so the heart of our implementation is the Auth0 backed OAuth provider class. Now, this class acts as a bridge between the MCP OAuth protocol that ChatGPT actually is, compatible with, and Auth0, which handles the actual user authentication. So I'm going to walk you through some of the key parts of it, not every single aspect of it, but the key things to keep in mind as you think about it. Now, very first thing you have to keep in mind is that we're only extending the OAuth authorization server provider class that comes from the MCP SDK itself. So this interface is basically what defines all the methods that we need to implement to act as an OAuth authorization server. All right, so let's talk about authorization flow. Now, authorization flow starts here with the authorize method that we have right here. So this method is basically when ChatGPT redirects the user to our authorize endpoint, right? So what's happening is that we generate this random state ID so we can track the entire auth request throughout its life cycle. We stash the pending request in memory, and this includes the MCP client's client ID and the redirect URI where we need to send the user after login, right? So we build the Auth0 authorization URL with our Auth0 app credentials, and then we return the URL. The MCP framework will redirect the user directly to that point. And at that point, that is when they start to see the Auth0 login page. All right. So when the user finishes logging in, Auth0 redirects them back to our auth/callback with a code and state. So once all of this is done, we should have our authentication provider ready to go. And the next thing is that we need to load all of this into our MCP server to get it wired up. So I'm going to go into our server.py, which is where our MCP server is actually initiated. All right, so first we want to load up our environment variables. So all of our Auth0 domain, client ID, client secrets, as well as some of the configuration as well. We want to load all of that up. And now if we go into our actual MCP server configuration, we want to pass our auth service provider, which we have defined. We want to pass that into the MCP server itself. All right, now so to configure the fast MCP with auth, we need to initialize our auth provider here with the settings that are required. And once we're done with that, we have our provider ready to go. And then we can pass that into our MCP configuration like this. And that essentially allows us to wire in authentication into our MCP server. Okay, so there are a few things that we need to keep in mind in terms of like some endpoints that we need to make available for the ChatGPT app to work with for discovery purposes. Now, the very first one is the OAuth authorization server. So this allows the client to get all the information about all the authorization details, like the authorization URL and all those things. They come when they hit this particular endpoint. So it's the discovery endpoint that you need to expose. So one of them is authorization server, and then there's also OAuth protected resource as well. So if we go down here, is the OAuth protected resource. So these are all MCP server routes that you need to expose as well. All right, and that's it. You have a fully authenticated ChatGPT app. User login via Auth0 using Google or email or any social provider you configure in your Auth0. Per user data is isolated. The secure token is based on authentication. The full code for this is going to be available in the GitHub repo that is linked in the description. I'm also going to add additional resources in there for you to understand exactly how Auth works. Now you can use this to try out, setting up some authentication for your ChatGPT apps. As always, keep building. Looking forward to seeing what you build. If you have any questions or come across any challenges while going through the setup for this, please feel free to drop a comment on this video. If you like videos like this, consider dropping us a like and also subscribe. Until next time, have a great one. Cheers.